What do you think the long-term expectations should be for Jonathan Smith? And what does Jonathan Smith need to do in 2025 and 2026 to buy your faith, to get you to invest in Michigan State emotionally, physically, going to the games, watching the games, being involved, standing up and not sitting on the bleachers and cheering your team on? What does he need to do? And what should the long-term expectations be for him at Michigan State? When I look at the Spartans and how they went 5-7 last year and 3-6, it was clear they were better than the 2023 year. It was abundantly clear. But the way they finished the year was disheartening, and I know that lost a lot of Spartan fans. It did, because you can't lose to Rutgers by 30 points. You cannot do that. You can't. You cannot look that pathetic against Illinois and never sack Altmaier. You can't do that. You can't. Especially when Illinois' offensive line was one of the worst in America at pass blocking, and you didn't register a single sack. Can't do it. You can't go up against Indiana 10-0 and then get blown out like that. You can't. Although I would excuse some of that because I think Indiana was a very good team. I think Indiana was one of the best teams in the nation at beating the teams you should beat. They may have been the best team in America at beating the teams you should beat. I mean, look at how they played Nebraska versus how Ohio State did. Look at how they played, let's say Maryland or Northwestern in juxtaposition to how Texas played Kentucky, for example. But even then, you can't come out and kind of hint that you don't exactly know a lot about the Michigan State rivalry and lose in that fashion to Michigan. And then the Boston College loss was bad. And I can go on and on and on. It was a better year than the year before, but it was still disheartening in many ways and finished on a bad note. Make sure before we resume to like, to subscribe, to hit the notification bell, and to comment your thoughts down below. And I'd love to have more Spartan fans on the channel, so if you know any who want in-depth college football analysis, and I love covering the Spartans, share this video and this channel with them so we can get more Spartan subscribers. They were 13th in the Big Ten, didn't register a postseason appearance. So again, disheartening year. You want Michigan State, if you're a Spartan fan, to go bowling basically every year. You want them to compete for Big Ten championships, for college football playoff spots, and last year they were not doing that. They showed some signs against Ohio State in the first half and against Oregon for a drive where it looked like, hey, they can hang a little bit with the top teams, but then it fell apart completely against Oregon and against Ohio State. Ohio State just won the turnover battle and won the fourth down battle, and that was it, and it turned into a blowout. So let's look at what I think are the long-term expectations. And what I'll do while discussing these with you is I'll weave in what he needs to do to be successful and what he needs to do this season, and I think the season after that, to achieve buy-in from the donors, from the fan base, from Jay Batt. Although I think Batt is trying to give him everything he can, because Jay Batt's worked at Georgia Tech. Yes, he worked at Alabama, so he knows how to operate a machine. He was their assistant AD. But he was Georgia Tech's AD, and Georgia Tech was a dumpster fire when he took it over. So I think he understands the phrase long-term rebuilds and how they apply. Georgia Tech this past season went 7-6 in Key's second year, and if you count his interim year, it was his third year total on the job. For Michigan State, this isn't the 2000s or 2010s anymore. I want to phrase that. And in the 2000s and 2010s, Michigan State's down years were still pretty bad. They went 3-9 in 2016. They had a losing record in several of the mid-early 2000 seasons under John L. Smith and Bobby Williams. Just seasons that were not good whatsoever. They had several choke jobs. They had seasons where they started off high, even under D'Antonio, 2016, 2012. Where started off ranked high and then finished just above 500 or below 500. I mean, think about 2018 and 19, the last years under D'Antonio, where they had some talent, they had some players, and it didn't amount to anything. And I know the East doesn't exist, so there will be seasons where, unlike when the East existed, Michigan State will have super easy schedules. There will be seasons like that. The scheduling floor in terms of strength of schedule is lower than it was when the East existed. But I will also say that the ceiling, the potential of a schedule to be so tough, is now at 2023 levels more often than you would think. In 2023, Michigan State had to play, I think, the three best teams in the country. Michigan, who won the title and shut them out. I think they were the best team in America. I think Ohio State was the second best team in the country. They had to play them on the road. I think Washington was third best, maybe second best, but Ohio State was definitely power rated better and had a much higher floor. They had to play Washington at home, and they had to play Penn State in a neutral field at the end of the year. And Penn State, power ratings-wise, was a top 5 team per FPI and certainly top 10. I mean, they had an absolute horrible schedule. And they had to play Iowa, who won 10 games. They had to play a Nebraska team who was better than them power ratings-wise. They played Rutgers, who won 7 games for the first time in forever under Greg Schiano and as a program in the Big Ten. That type of schedule is going to be more commonplace from here on out than it was in the East, because it seems like Michigan State's willing to schedule tough out-of-conference games. And you can have seasons now where you play Oregon, Ohio State, Penn State, and Michigan all in conference. The potential for your conference slate to look like something out of the SEC, as in last year's Florida or Georgia, is higher than it ever was because of super conferences and because you added really good teams and programs like USC, Oregon, Washington. And I think the average Big Ten team is trending up. USC is coming out of a down cycle. Oregon, I think, is still rising under Lanning. Ohio State is where they have always been in recent memory, and I don't think they're dropping off. Penn State is leveling up under Franklin. Michigan's leveling off, but they're coming from the mountaintop, and they can just as easily get back there. And teams like Washington are on the rise, Nebraska's on the rise, Wisconsin could be, Minnesota's going to be tough. The Big Ten's only getting tougher here. And I say that to say that I think 5-7, 6-6 is the floor. And that'll be this way from here on out. I don't mean to say that a 5-7 or 6-6 team of last season is acceptable. That's unacceptable even this year. I'm talking about 5-7 where you lose all of your close games. You lose a bunch of close games. You're competitive in almost every game. You have some blowout wins. So a team that power ratings wise would be much better than last year, but you finish with a 5-7 record because maybe your schedule's tougher, or you were even more unlucky and you lose all your close games. Same with 6-6. The Big Ten is the toughest it's ever been in its history. It really is, with 18 teams and the amount of high caliber recruiting programs and developmental programs. I think the Big Ten has the best staffs and the best developmental programs in America right now. And in adding Oregon and USC, who I think are top 5 recruiting programs moving forward, with the new NIL rules, even with some of the old NIL rules, and just in this new era, I think that, again, Oregon, USC, Ohio State, those are top 5 recruiting programs from here on out. The Big Ten got closer to the SEC in recruiting and overall football profile than before the Big Ten added UCLA, USC, Washington, and Oregon, and the SEC added Oklahoma and Texas. So I think there has to be an acceptance that the floor can be low from here on out. But a floor is something that should happen once in a while. Just once in a while. Not every year, not even every other year. And I think this coming season, MSU at least has to go 6-6, preferably more so 7-5, to get buy-in. And I think that 8-4, which is actually my record prediction for them this year, funnily enough, that would be a phenomenal year. And I think it'll be similar in 2026 and moving on. Their schedules, I think from here on out, are actually only going to get tougher or at least remain the same in toughness. But their talent profile should upgrade. Their staff, I think, is one of the best in the Big Ten. So you should expect steady improvement. Similar to, I would comp this to Shane Beamer at South Carolina. Even though Michigan State's a better football program than South Carolina, you don't have the same recruiting bases, the same talent base, the same pipelines. But it's a similar story in the sense that South Carolina and Michigan State shouldn't expect themselves to win the Big Ten even every other year, every 3 years, just with how they operate. They're going to usually be a tier below some other programs. Not saying they should shoot for that. You should try to be the best in America if you can, but it's less realistic for MSU and South Carolina to be the best in America than it is for Ohio State, Penn State, Oregon, USC, and Michigan, for example. So I think sometimes seasons like this will occur with Michigan State, and you should be okay with it. I'm not saying that you should put up with it. It should be like, yes, it was disappointing, but we're not going to fire you. Just make sure you're better next year type of thing. Not something that should be consistently accepted. That should be paired with, this team should win, I think under Smith, in the long term, they should win a Big Ten title or two. And they should compete for the CFP in more years than not. The ceiling should still be high at Michigan State because it is high. They're a top 20 program with a wealthy alumni base, with a good Big Ten endowment, with a wonderful athletic director, and a staff that I would argue is certainly, even at the very worst, top third in the Big Ten. I think at best, top 3 in the Big Ten. So top 6th and possibly top 10 nationally. That should be the expectation for the long term. I think competing for the CFP and 1 or 2 Big Ten titles is realistic. I think that winning 1 or 2 Big Ten titles while Smith is at Michigan State and reaching the CFP some seasons and at least being in the hunt in November more years than not is realistic. It is. And I actually think Michigan State's ceiling is higher than this. I think if Michigan State gets their boosters engaged and fundraises well and upgrades the stadium, retains their staff, brings in more talent than D'Antonio ever did under this staff, and plays their schedule right, I think that they can shoot even higher than this. But I don't want to talk about that yet until I see progress made. It's only been 1 year under the Jonathan Smith era. So just want to be a little bit more patient. But State's a good enough program, I think, to where they could win a title if they have the right coach. A national title. Just don't want to get there yet because of how many good programs and coaches there are, and Michigan State's still in a rebuilding mode and in a rough spot. But I think the long-term expectations for Michigan State and Jonathan Smith, if he wants stability, if he wants job security, the short-term expectations are next year you have to go bowling. And I would say finish with a winning record. 6-7 would buy you time, but I don't think it would get you buy-in. 7-6, 8-5 would get you buy-in for sure. I think 9-4 would result in an outpouring of resources, perhaps greater than even the Mel Tucker era. And then I think that in the long term, Michigan State occasionally are going to have a 500 season because of how talent works, how the portal works, the fact that Michigan State, unless something unforeseen happens, is always going to be out-recruited by probably at least half of the Big Ten programs. That's going to happen occasionally, a 500 season or maybe a win below that. But at the same time, every once in a while to offset that, or more often than having a down year like that, Michigan State should be competing for the Big Ten championship game in November. They should be competing for the college football playoff in November. And they should win a Big Ten title or two and some playoff games under Jonathan Smith with the caliber of coach he is and with the caliber of program that they are historically. Thank you so much for watching. Remember to like, subscribe, and hit the bell. Comment your thoughts on this video down below, and I will see you all very soon.